I'm here. That guy.
I love it. I love it. My name is Sonny. I'm part of the Render Network Foundation. So we help look after the Render Network. The Render Network is a decentralized network of GPUs, which helps artists get their work done quicker and faster. Right now, the Render Network is doing a token upgrade. So from RNDR to Render, RENDER. I'm just looking at all of these comments. People are admiring your work so much. And I'd love to introduce our guest today, David Ariew. So David, it's awesome to have you here. Would you like to do a little bit of an introduction? Because I would do you a disservice. I mean, I know a lot about you, but I'd love for you to give our viewers a little bit of a description as to what you do and why you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, thanks so much for having me here today. I've been in the industry for about 13 years, but I got passionate about filmmaking even before that when I was in college. Around 2006, when YouTube was just getting started, I discovered so that's where it all started for me, was just a love of filmmaking and collaborating with other creative people. And so I would shoot and edit these Zelda parodies, but something about the software, even though it was just like iMovie, it's the most basic software, something about the software and the goofy effects really appealed to me. And just the ability to add visuals in post, or that extra layer of creative control you can get through software, was kind of what hooked me in. And so that extended to learning Final Cut Pro and After Effects and color grading and editing. So I just kind of went further and further down the rabbit hole. And it wasn't for another 5 years, in 2011, that I finally tried Cinema 4D. But that's what really got me hooked in. So just the ability to create worlds and stories completely in the computer was just so insane to me. Kind of felt like playing the most complex and open-ended, open world game ever invented,
Yeah.
And at that point I was very into filmmaking, like I said, shooting, editing, color grading, and even VFX work. But this was a new level for me, because I could plan and rework the shot as many times I wanted, and until I could create exactly what was in my head. And so to me that was the most fun thing ever, and I was just totally addicted. But yeah, as for how I got the nickname Octane Jesus, in 2017, I started making tutorials for my buddy EJ Hassenfratz's channel. He's a really well-known 3D artist, really well-known Cinema 4D educator.
Yeah.
It's a super successful channel going already with a few 100,000 subscribers. So this was an opportunity for me to reach a wider audience. And he kind of just approached me and was there's not a lot of Octane tutorials and content out there at the time. So after a few tutorials that I released, someone in the comments was hey, this guy's Octane Jesus, just because of my long hair and Jesus-like appearance, I guess. And also the fact that I was freely, downloading my brain into these tutorials, trying to make them the highest quality possible, and teaching my process from start to finish. I don't like to just skip over things. I like to show my entire process for creating an environment or a look, and basically handhold the artist through it and give them a really good base to start from, rather than kind of jumping through things. I don't like to assume any kind of prior knowledge,
Yeah.
Anyway, that comment, Octane Jesus, just caught fire, and everyone on the internet just started calling me Octane Jesus. And at first I was very unsure. I'm I wasn't sure whether I was cool with it, but after a while I realized that my options are roll with it or fight it. And why would I fight this? When the internet brands you, you just kind of gotta go with it. So
yeah.
After that, my buddy Smearballs, who's another really awesome 3D artist, photoshopped my face into the Jesus picture, and the rest was history. So that's been my PFP ever since, and that's my online identity. And it's funny, it's now I'll go to conferences and people are wait, are you Otoy Jesus? Are you the Jesus guy? And so they don't even know my name.
Are you the Jesus guy?
That reputation precedes me above even my own name now. It's just pretty fucking funny.
That's cool. I mean, yeah, you've fully embraced it. You've got the picture right behind you as well.
Yeah, my wife got this for me for my birthday. It's little LED fake neon type deal.
That's cool. That's cool. Well,
Yeah.
embrace it. It's like you say, when you get branded by the socials, you know what? It's a cool following as well, though, right? You've got like so many people who are artists who love your work and have learned from your work as well. So that must be really humbling as well.
Oh yeah, it's humbling. It's like so gratifying to teach and then see people making crazy ass visuals just based on the information I shared. And that's like the beautiful thing I think about the Cinema 4D and Octane community is the amount of free information sharing. And that's like how I got my start too. I didn't go to film school. I just watched a fuckload of tutorials on the internet. And then I felt inspired to share my information and give back to the community. And that's only paid me back tenfold. It's just a positive back loop and positive cycle. All of the information sharing, you know?
Well, talking about visuals. So you've done some amazing concert visuals for artists, right? I'll mention a few. I've got them written down here. So Mariah Carey, right? Megan Thee Stallion, Missy Elliott, Zed, Excision, Deadmau5, Keith Urban, Lil Nas X, Travis Scott, Drake.
Mm-hmm.
There's, I'm sure I've missed like a ton as well. But like, how did you get into concert visuals, and how do you keep your designs so fresh and engaging?
I appreciate it. Thank you. So I lucked out in that my very first job in this industry was actually in concert visuals all the way back in 2011. So I really started there. I mean, after that job, I like went and ran the whole gamut of post-production from like DIT work, which is like on-set data management and color correction, to VFX, 2D motion design. Basically, I would do anything that was post-production in my freelance days. But eventually I came back to concert visuals as my home. And my favorite, to me, it's like the most artful medium in the world of client work, like more so than commercials or films, because it's usually pure CG. Often the clients will give me a very open brief where they're just like, here's some like colors, here's a mood board, like pick something you're interested in and roll with it and make some crazy trippy visuals, Yeah. And so for me, that's the most like pure artistic, it's like the closest to making my own personal artwork in the client world. So that's very much why I gravitate towards it. But yeah, so the first job I had was in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is this small ass town, but that happened to be where Dave Matthews got his start. And his lighting designer also lived in town and had created a company called Filament Productions. And it was basically the only company in town that was doing any kind of post-production work or like any graphics of any kind. And at that point, I already had a good deal of After Effects practice under my belt, and they hired me. And it was like a great training ground for me for 3 years. And I loved like collabing with the people shooting the content and going on set with them, as well as just like devouring like every tutorial known to man and treating my work like a mad science laboratory. We do things like burn steel wool on a black background and shoot it in slow-mo. And that gets you all these little itty bitty fires and like this very complex look. And then we take that and composite it into the sky, and track it into the sky of some other footage. And so it was just like a lot of experimentation. We do things like shoot sand elements in a water tank, and then I take those and integrate them into like full CG cloud scenes. And at the time, like a lot of it was this mixed practical and fully digital, like these processes, because rendering was so much more time consuming and expensive. So a lot of the time it was more VFX based. But it was such a fun job, and the team was like so out there with their ideas and creativity that it got me like very comfortable with blank slates and just being an idea factory. And at some point I realized that I couldn't even communicate with the director of photography shooting the content, and that I didn't even know what lenses he should use or what lenses even meant or anything about filmmaking really. So I proceeded to like drop my entire savings on camera gear. And I was obsessed for years with cameras. I even bought like a jib, a slider, like gimbals, several DSLRs, GoPros, and even a Steadicam, which was my favorite. At the time, really, the gimbals weren't as good. Steadicam was like the thing. Yeah. And I would, we would rent a Red Epic, and I would shoot it in low mode, so you'd be close to the ground, getting a really wide angle. But I was never like a great DP. I was pretty clumsy, but it absolutely like trained my eye for composition and lighting, and for just like movement in general, camera movement, visual storytelling. So for anyone getting into 3D, I'd say it's like a total necessity to pick up a camera and get super comfortable with it as an art form, because aspects of cinematography like camera movement and lighting are just hugely important to making CG look beautiful and believable. So like if you don't have those techniques and that knowledge under your belt, you're not going to be that great at 3D animation. And so now I very much consider myself a digital cinematographer, and my ability to like direct light and movement is what I'd say keeps my visuals always feeling like high end and fresh. That and just like trying hard on every job and having like a very high set of standards for my own work. I think that the higher quality, like it's a race to the bottom to try and create more and more visuals fast and like kind of low quality. Like you're not going to get paid the most. I think it's way more important to try and set yourself apart by creating very high quality imagery.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you've got that deep background knowledge now, from having none whatsoever all the way to having used all these cameras and equipment, and like I can completely relate to that, because my background is architecture, and I've also been a photographer in my time as well. So like lenses, I would geek out over lenses and figuring out, like my favorite is a 50mm 1.2.
Totally.
I still rock my 5D Mark II, and it's my go-to set, right? So like I take that everywhere, and it's amazing.
Yeah, and that 50.2, I know that's one of the high ends. Like that lens is more than like $1,000, and it's like got the most beautiful bokeh and all that. Yeah, absolutely. That was one of my favorites.
It's amazing, and like especially for like travel photography as well, because you never know what the lighting's going to be like, and this lens just eats up any light that it can find.
Totally.
It's beautiful, such a beautiful lens. So what are like your work is categorized by rich visuals and a lot of storytelling and attention to detail. Would you be able to tell us or walk us through your creative process from like concept to completion?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, again, thank you so much. So, I mean, the answer to this question is very dependent on the type of visuals we're talking about, because I have a large variety of styles that I love to play in.
Cool.
For something more like concrete and cinematic, like my cyberpunk work, for example, let's just take that as an example. There's a lot more planning and painstaking work that goes into just building a world like that. So first, to assemble all the assets, kit bash all the models together. I don't model myself because that would just take, orders of magnitude more time if I wanted to build out a whole world. But so the first thing is just assembling all the assets, kit bashing all the different models together, and trying to create something that feels overall like unified and has harmony across the visual language of that shot, and creating a composition that's pleasing. So basically, if it's like a cyberpunk city, building up all the buildings and just combining buildings together, like stacking things together in the frame, and just art directing everything into the frame like a cinematographer would do on set. And then comes like texturing all the models. So I typically texture everything from scratch. Sometimes models will come with nice textures, already from TurboSquid, from different 3D stock sites, but typically I'll go in and tweak the textures at the very least. But if I want it to be the highest quality, often I'll literally hand select all the textures from scratch and make sure that they have, a kind of unity, that nothing's really standing out like a sore thumb and looking overly grungy or not, or too clean. Like, it's weird because in 3D you're kind of like working backwards. Like cinematographers are often trying to get the most perfect result possible with like a dolly that has the smoothest tracks and like super art directed, like think Wes Anderson. But in 3D you're kind of starting from a place of perfection and trying to add in imperfections. So you're adding in all of those things that make it look more photoreal to an extent. You are like trying to also like reach that visual language of cinematography. You're not necessarily trying to create the real world. You're trying to create the real world as seen by filmmakers, like that visual movie language that we've gotten used to over decades of our lives. So after, texturing, there's also like color harmonies, like color palettes in general, but also like making sure all the colors of the various things that you're texturing fit together, and putting enough detail in the textures that there's this, like I said, sense of photorealism, or at least that you're looking at something high-end enough. Like it doesn't necessarily need to be completely photoreal, but something that looks high-end, And then I also light everything to the angle of the camera, which really brings out the colors and the details and all the models and textures, and adds so much style and interest. Like the mood is so dictated by the lighting, so that's another huge effect. And then from there, maybe there's character animation or applying mocap animations, and finally animating the camera so it feels like it's got weight, so it feels like it's a practical camera moving on set that would do something like it really would on set. And that's all just for one shot, right? So that's just one shot. If I change the camera angle, I'll most likely have to re-art direct the whole scene, move buildings around so the composition's more interesting, relight everything to that new camera angle so that that shot looks as good as it possibly can be. And then there's also figuring out the whole sequence or story that you're telling across the edit. So, there, in that case, like mood boards come into play, at the very start. There's like, storyboards can be helpful. A lot of the time I just jump in though, and I'll go into previs, which is with gray renders that are just, extremely fast to export. And that gives you a sense of the overall composition and the movement. And then you can kind of stitch those together quickly and see how movements and shots will play across the cut. Because that's another huge thing, is like continuity of motion across the cut, like, like cutting on action. There's so many editing things that are important. And I try to do those previs things before committing to a full render, which is often the most time-consuming process. Is just kicking off a render and waiting for 6 hours, 12 hours, or more than a day on certain shots, depending on how much of, how much of the kitchen sink I've thrown at it, basically. So that's all to say that it can be a very painstaking process. I still enjoy that process, but it can be really time-consuming. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, I've got my abstract work, which is kind of this rabbit hole I've gone down with infinite mirror rooms, like mirror boxes, and to me that feels way more experimental and playful. And a lot of my other concert visual stuff too is very abstract and not necessarily involving infinite mirror rooms, but just like cloning things out a ton, creating weird abstract things, like playing with ultra fisheye lenses and all sorts of weird stuff to create trippy and abstract effects. So it's like, rather than competing on this spectrum of photorealism, which is often just like the hardest thing to do as a solo artist, finding something unique that's like your own, that's like more experimental, more artistic, and not necessarily, and yes, it has elements of photorealism, but it's more like something unique to yourself. Yeah. And so for me, it's like obsessively syncing things to the music, where every sound, it's like, what does this track look like? What does this music look like? Figuring that out is more interesting to me. But yeah, like especially with my mirror box world, I can go in without any planning. And I just move the camera around and tweak settings until I get something that looks crazy and unique. And the beautiful thing here is that it's impossible to know how it'll look beforehand. So it's like the opposite of that super photorealistic process. And all the bounces and reflections like reveal something new every time. And to me, processes like these are like the most fruitful and creative. And it's the most fun that I've had doing 3D work, because of how it feels like the software just gets out of the way and I'm like in a zone of pure imagination and creativity. Yeah. And like when I first stumbled on these techniques, for example, it was like for this Keith Urban visual, and usually I'll develop like maybe 5 style frames in a day. That's like one of the first things in the process, is just developing a frame of like how this animation could look, or what the composition and lighting looks like, or whatever. But with these mirror box processes, I put out 100 frames in a day. So it was like an order of magnitude or more in terms of how much I was able to output. So the abstract stuff to me is definitely like the most fun for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, seeing your abstract work, I'm a huge fan of your work. It's like so engaging, and it's like kind of trippy at points, but in a very, very good way. It's like, when you talk about the syncing of various elements to the music, like how you get the lights to be just right and the camera moves as well. It's like it's you've perfected this niche art form, I think.
Totally.
It's super. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Yeah, niche is exactly the right word, and I think that's what a lot of artists struggle to discover about themselves for like a decade or longer, is what their personal art form looks like and what their niche is. And when you find that, things get a lot easier and a lot, like, you make money faster, you get hired for that style of artwork that you've come to develop. It's almost like discovering it. It's almost like creating an invention of your own.
Yeah, that's it.
For that work is like the best, for sure.
Yeah, and then you can completely get lost into the flow of doing that as well. Like, time, just goes, and you're still in the middle of finding this particular look and like really loving the process. And I think that's a beautiful thing that many artists are still yet to find, especially those who are just beginning this process.
Totally. Yeah.
So what are some of the key tools and software that you rely on to achieve this sort of aesthetic and high quality in your artwork?
Octane. My main tools are Cinema 4D and Octane. To me, they both have a very user-friendly feel, and they feel like they're designed with artists in mind, because they're like both intuitive and extremely deep. So it's like kind of Apple, where it's like, easy on the eyes, it's like easy to find the menus, and you're not digging through like code and things like that. It's like very intuitive user interface, but extremely deep. Like, you can literally learn these programs for the rest of your life. They're that deep. Yeah. And I can pretty much make anything in my head at this point, or anything that a client asks me for, with just those two tools. Obviously, there's a lot of satellite programs, World Creator, like Embergen, After Effects and Premiere. I use a ton. Photoshop, like, the list goes on. Like, there are millions of tools I want to learn, like Marvelous Designer, Substance Painter, Substance Designer, Unreal Engine. There's like a ton of stuff out there. Even Houdini and more simulation software. Like, I love this plugin called X Particles in Cinema that I use constantly. But in general, it's Cinema 4D and Octane. And Cinema 4D is really like built with so many amazing animation tools, and it's like a total Swiss Army knife. And Octane takes it a step further because it's an unbiased render engine and has a very photorealistic look right off the bat, because of how it calculates light so accurately. And Otoy is also constantly throwing in curveballs and unexpected pieces of software into the mix, like Vectron, for instance, which is a fractal render engine, something nobody expected to ever get. It's not like artists are demanding this, but these ideas for like, oh, this could be cool, and then suddenly we've got this crazy thing to play with. So I love it when they throw new toys into the mix like that. Or the more recent like photon tracing kernel, which makes it super easy to create caustics and more realistic animations. And that can spawn like a whole genre of visual imagery and kind of like things to play with just in and of itself, And then there are tons of camera controls in Octane that are essential for me for creating like trippy concert visuals nowadays, like several panoramic cameras that I use, or like ultra fisheye lenses. There's a very easy chromatic aberration, slider now. There are interesting bokeh options and lots of other weird ways to like distort what's in the field of view. So yeah, I mean, we don't need to get like too overly technical and into the weeds on the software, but in general, I feel like, both of those pieces of software are extremely artist friendly, and they get out of the way more than any other software that I've used to allow just that pure creativity and kind of like matching to that cinematic language, and are just really beautiful right out of the box a lot of the time. Yeah,
absolutely. I've used Cinema 4D since R9, so I don't know when that came out, but that was like a very long time ago.
That's a very long time ago. Yeah, I think I got in like R11 maybe, or R10. So you might be even more OG than me.
Well, I've not done as much work as you though, but it's mainly architectural visualizations. That's what I've created.
Yeah, art business.
Yeah, and Octane as well. Like because of my photography background as well, being able to dial in the exact lens that I want for a particular look, and get super specific with all the attributes about the lens and dial all of that in. Yeah, that's amazing with Octane.
That's hugely important to me too.
Yeah. So you also use the render network, and how have you found the render network? Just generally.
In general, it's like rendering is always the biggest bottleneck, right? If you want to create really high-end visuals, that might not be true in a few years as we move closer and closer to true real-time rendering. But there's always a weird thing that happens where the more fast it becomes to create high-quality work, the harder we push the software. And the more we want to throw things like volumetrics and caustics and like whatever the next most expensive thing to render is, we always push the envelope. So it's kind of a weird thing, we always want our visuals to look more and more impressive and beautiful. And on top of that, clients are always asking for higher and higher resolution. One thing not a lot of people know is that the jump from 1080 to 4K, for instance, isn't a 2x in terms of the resolution. It's 4 times more resolution because it's an area problem. It's length by width. So there are actually 4 times more pixels in 4K footage. And rendering at 4K takes 4 times longer than HD. So when you move into concert visuals or these immersive installations, you're often rendering at 8K or 12K, and it gets just ridiculous. Yeah. So even though I've got 8 3090s spread across 4 machines here locally, that never feels like enough, and I'm often waiting for renders for a day or longer to finish, right? So that's where the render network is incredible to me when I've got a job that requires a ton of visuals really fast or extremely high resolution. Like for the Sphere, for instance, I got to work for the Sphere, 8 months ago or something, and that was super crazy. But these are the kind of new canvases that are evolving, and so the demand for the render jobs is so many orders of magnitude higher. I'm unique in that I have my own render farm locally, which is amazing for most jobs, and it saves me a ton of money because render farms, let's be real, they're still expensive. Render network is still expensive. But when you get into the demands of producing a high-end commercial with a team, where they need things just ultra fast, or a whole show for concert visuals for a well-known artist, you're producing the companies I work with produce 50 minutes to an hour of content in a couple weeks, and that's just unheard of. And you can't do that without a render farm, So render is incredible because it networks all of these machines together, and it's a distributed, like you said, decentralized network of computers that users are putting up there. And if you plug your machines into that network, essentially, you can basically store up power, allow other people to use your GPUs, or allow other people to render jobs for artists, and basically mine tokens that way that you can use later to get jobs done extremely fast when you have that super high demand client or a massive job, with tons of visuals needed in a very short time. So without, render farms like Render, that just wouldn't be possible. And the more people that join in the network and allow their GPUs to be used, the more powerful the network grows. So it's this positive feedback loop, and I think it's one of the most innovative ideas ever, and it's still just in its infancy. We really haven't seen the full potential released yet. So it's really just getting started.
Yeah, absolutely. And just touching on these new mediums, like you said, you did some work with the Sphere. Now, the Sphere in Las Vegas, I'm sure everybody on Instagram and Twitter and everywhere has seen some of these visuals, right? Whether it's done by some big corporate company, it's a ridiculous amount they spend on it per day as well, just to display these ads and things.
A day for just the advertising to be on the Sphere,
yeah, it's absolutely next level. And I think I read somewhere that the resolution inside is 16K, which is wow. 16.
I worked outside of the Sphere, which is more 5.5, 6K, so that was pretty easy in comparison. 16K is stupid. It's amazing, but it's our computers can't handle it. We need so much more power,
Yeah, I think I did some rough calculations, and from 1080p to 16K. I think this is 16K, if it was 3D, so one for each eye, and at the correct sort of hertz or frames per second it needs, it's something ridiculous, like 200x the amount of power, GPU power is needed compared to 1080p.
100%.
And that's wow.
I rendered my own VR experience, and that was just 4.5K by 4.5K, and it took 2 months on my 1080. I'm on my 3090s. On my 3090s, it took 2 months. So that's just 4.5K by 4.5K for two eyes. So imagine 16K, it would take years. It's like people don't really understand how much more render power it does take for those level of visuals.
That's it. And something like the render network can be very, very, very handy like that, because I think there's some nodes on the network with 4 to 12, 4090. So it's that's some beefy equipment there, and
absolutely,
that can chew through some of these really intense projects that need rendering out.
100%. Yeah.
So, let's talk about some of the challenges that you may have encountered while working on some of these large-scale projects. So how do you overcome these technical and creative hurdles?
Definitely. Let me just actually, I'm like kind of looking at, I wrote out some bullet points for some of these, and I'm like jumping around trying to see like where that is, because I've, written something out. Let's see, one sec.
Yeah, that's my fault. I keep jumping to different things.
No, you're good. I got it. So, I'd say that like problem solving is one of the most important skills for this job in general. And after a decade of solving problems in Cinema 4D and Octane specifically, it's very much like second nature to me. So it's like, it's like we could go into like a specific challenge or problem, but every single job is a whole slew of challenges and problems. Because every single job is unique. And I'm always asked to create some completely different scene it's like, oh, this one's a beach on Miami. This one's a cyberpunk city. This one's, make some like light sculptures. I have to do everything. So it's like you get very used to just solving problems in general. But one of my strategies over the years has been to literally watch hundreds of tutorials for fun. And then when a client asks me to do something I've never done before, I've got an encyclopedia of information already in my head that I can just refer to. And I'll be like, oh yeah, there was that one tutorial about that cloth thing or the glitter look or whatever it is. And I go watch that and start from there, so that I'm not reinventing the wheel every time, basically. So that's, like I said, that's probably my favorite thing about the C4D community is the free and open sharing of information. And that attitude began very early with artists like Nick Campbell from Grayscale Gorilla and Andrew Kramer from Video Copilot. And they passed the buck on to artists like myself who learned everything from tutorials. We didn't go to film school. Not to say that I don't learn on the job. I learned tons on the job as well, but that's a slow process over time. And a lot of the time you need to jumpstart that learning just by watching a tutorial or a class. And so, I very much felt the desire to give back to the community that made this whole thing possible. And 3D is like so complex and there's so much involved that nobody could ever just learn everything, that there is to learn about 3D, like full stop, without having to refer to forums and tutorials at least some of the time. So that collective database of information is an essential part of why any of us can even make halfway decent visuals to begin with nowadays, right? Now, beyond that, if I get stuck, I'll reach out to friends who are smarter than me in certain departments, whether it's simulations or, modeling or UV unwrapping. There's a lot of holes in my knowledge that I'm very aware of. That doesn't usually slow me down, though. So if there are specific problems or some kind of workflow that I've never encountered before, I'll ask an expert. I'll reach out to my large network of artist friends. And that's another huge thing, too, is just networking and having a network to call upon. But I find with like all the information out there already, I rarely have to do that. Usually I can solve all the problems that I have to on any given job just by dancing my way through a bunch of tutorials and kit bashing tutorials together, basically. And then a lot of it is stuff that I'll stumble on just by tweaking parameters. I've gotten very good at like tinkering around the software until I get a result that's pleasing to my eye. And I just keep revising and revising until it's something that I like. But I've also gotten good at like kind of knocking it out of the park first go nowadays, and I'll take on like 2 or 3 jobs at a time because I work really fast now and I just like jam out cool looking shit a lot of the time. But you know, being a 3D artist in general will get you very comfortable with being uncomfortable. It'll get you outside of your comfort zone all the time, and literally every job will have a whole slew of problems that you've never encountered before because of the vast array of different types of visuals needed by clients. You know, after a while, you really do become a one-man band, especially with all the help of all the education content that's already out there.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think it's you know, the Cinema 4D and Octane community are amazing, absolutely amazing.
100%.
And like, I've watched so many tutorials, and there's like Brilly. Everyone's heard of Brilly, and
he's a good friend of mine.
Yeah, he's amazing. I had a chat with him the other week on Spaces as well.
Nice.
And just talking about his work through, you know, his how he works through his projects, and he loves to give back to the community as well. So he does loads of tutorials and stuff. And yeah, it's just so cool. Anything that you ever need to know, you can just literally go on YouTube or reach out to, you know, artists. And I find that artists are generally very, very helpful.
Yeah, I think that artists are such a good group of people that, you know, it's like we don't have these there's no corrupt artists, there's no corporate greed, there's, you know, it's like we're just making visuals for fun and doing something that we love. And so that comes from a very pure place. And so I think that artists are often very open and accepting. And I'm not, I think there are some other communities that are a lot more cutthroat. Like, I've seen it in photography, I've seen it in some traditional art, and even other 3D communities like 3ds Max. I've seen guarding of trade secrets, but ultimately that doesn't help anyone. It's like, if you're guarding your trade secrets, you're hoarding information, you're preventing other artists from, you're preventing the development of the community. And I think it's a very short-term mindset. If you are open and sharing with your information, people can't steal your trade secrets because you're not thinking about that decade or however long you've been at this job. There are so many soft skills that go into someone's career, and it's like their taste, their eye that's been developed in all of these ways that you can't even really, account for. Like, what movies have you watched? How much have you thought about cinematography? All of the courses that you've taken over your career, all the different jobs, all of those go into honing your skills, your taste, your abilities. So by the time someone's learned, something in my tutorial, yeah, they can make what's in the tutorial, but they can't necessarily innovate off of that too much. And there's going to be a lot of things that they do that are not going to look as high quality as someone with my level of experience. So I'm never threatened that people are going to come take my job. And by the time I've gotten there, I've already moved on to the next thing, and I'm already learning more and more things. So in this job, you do have to be comfortable with constantly learning, but I think that giving away information for free is actually a great way to, gain a following, get recognition in the community, and it will just get you more work. And it's not having that lack mindset in any walk of life, I think will prevent you from achieving your goals.
Yeah. I think knowledge share is hugely important in practically every industry. It's everybody can learn together, and it just creates a nice, harmonious community as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
So with the next question I want to ask you. So the Render Network, we've already discussed it a tiny bit. So it enables artists to produce really high quality work and a lot of content at scale. So we have artists who, instead of having monster machines at home with 4 of the latest GPUs, they're able to sit in a coffee shop with a MacBook and literally get on with their work and send it to the Render Network. How do you think this kind of shift will help artists?
I think that, let me think. With the scale of, with concert visuals, with any of these bigger canvases, with immersive art, it all becomes more and more possible. The rendering demands are just constantly increasing for things like VR. If we want to create these immersive experiences at ultra high resolution, it's absolutely essential to have more render power, and also like things on the horizon like Brigade, which is Octane's upcoming real-time render engine. Obviously with any real-time render engine, there are also sacrifices in the realism that are made, but for lots of scenes, like the results are extremely realistic and the difference is unnoticeable. And that, it's like Octane is close to real time, but there's still a lot of lag between when you fire off the scene and when you actually see an image. And the quicker that feedback loop is between moving the camera and seeing your image, the faster artists can work. And so real time will really free up artists to be so much more creative. And there's actually a massive difference between how fast render engines like Octane update right now and true real-time render engines. So I can't really stress enough like what kind of a game changer that will be for us. And same thing goes with things like the render network, the ability to fire off a render and see the results immediately and get back your thing and make your movie like so much faster. Like it's all just moving more and more towards us being able to create like Marvel level visuals, in our own basements, like, creating our own movies in our computers. And that's the dream. So it's scary in that, AI and all these different things are, it's the progress is so rapid in ways, and it feels like it will take away from the specific skills that we've developed over time, but we'll replace those with new skills. And ultimately, I think it'll just be freeing. And as the software becomes more art directable, and that process, that feedback loop, the speed increases, the speed actually equals more creativity. So the faster you can go with rendering, the faster you can go with previewing the render inside the software, the faster you can cut right to creating. And that's what I think creatives ultimately want. They don't necessarily realize that because they are threatened by things like AI, but really like whatever get us there faster, to just being able to download whatever's in our brain into the computer and create some kind of beautiful experience or movie for someone and our audiences, the better. So, it's growing pains, but it's also an age of like abundance, I think, that we're entering.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of talking about or bridging over to like the future of the landscape. So obviously digital art is gaining more recognition in mainstream art and media. So how do you see the role of 3D artists evolving in this landscape? And what advice would you give to aspiring digital artists looking to make their mark?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, so as I said earlier, designing for like immersive installations requires longer form content at higher resolutions, higher frame rates, and way more canvases, more screens and pieces of content need to be rendered. And when it comes to VR and 3D screens, multiple angles also have to be rendered to create the effect of seeing in depth. So essentially you're rendering the same piece of content multiple times for things like multiple eyes, and all of this just adds up to a massive rendering bottleneck, and certain ideas become cost prohibitive. So, or just, time consuming in that deadlines won't be met. So this is where like Render Network comes in to solve that problem. And I believe like our society is hungering for more and more of these intricate immersive experiences like these. And they're completely unique and beyond what we can see in like day-to-day life, So I think the demand will only increase as like the world catches on, And like for me, it like things like VR open up a totally new avenue of creativity. It's my new favorite canvas to design for. So back almost a year ago, I got the opportunity to design my first solo exhibition. It was for the Digital Art Fair Asia in Hong Kong, and I got to create a full 9-minute meditative immersive 4-wall experience, basically where the visuals kind of come at you and wrap around you, and then if you turn around, they're moving away from you. So it feels like you're in this glass box being transported through dimensions that you've never seen before. And that created a very visceral and emotional experience for some people. And it's like in the past, my first 10 years of work before I really dug into what my personal style of artwork is, the most I could hope for was to produce a feeling of awe in the viewers, or maybe make them laugh, or maybe I had like a music video that had kind of a narrative arc where there was, you know, kind of a sad story happening, and it, you know, some people said that they, you know, that they felt emotional watching it. Like that's the most I could hope for, was kind of these narrative experiences. But with these more immersive experiences, and especially with VR, because VR communicates scale better than anything I've ever seen before, right? It puts you as a viewer into the art. It's not just that you're viewing the art. I'm really tired of people just like seeing my art on a small screen and swiping to the next thing, right?
Yeah.
This leaves an emotional impact with the audience. So during this Hong Kong art fair, like I had my massive immersive experience that I spent months rendering, but I also had my VR experience, which is just a 2.5 minute long experience. And that was the hit of the entire art fair. I had a line, you know, around the corner of people coming in to watch just this VR experience, because word got out. Like day one, it was kind of like thin. And then day two, people were bringing their families back, like bringing their friends.
Wow.
Thing out. So, and I was shocked the first time I put my visuals into VR. This actually came from NFTs, interestingly. I spent 2 years kind of crafting this visual style over, you know, throughout my NFT journey, and I had a Discord community, and they encouraged me to bring the visuals into VR. And at first I was like, no, I don't want to have to learn this new thing. But when I first did, I just started with a still, and I brought a still of one of my mirror boxes into VR to test it, and I was blown away. I was like, okay, this is really something. And then I rendered an animated version, and the first time I went in there, I pretty much started crying. I was shocked that I had made this thing. It didn't even feel like mine. It was like incredible for me seeing, like, VR really communicates depth more than anything, right? So it puts you in this awe-inspiring space, and you're literally seeing off out into infinity. And that actually, I think, can help solve people's existential crises. So that's not something I ever thought I could say about my own personal art, ever. You know, like I never expected to be able to create something that would actually like cause this feeling of peace in the viewer. Like people would put on the experience and stay in there for like 10 minutes and like loop through it a bunch of times and then come out like, this is what it looks like to leave this world and travel to the afterlife. And, you know, like they had chills, they had this feeling of peace, like they knew that when they died, it was going to be okay. So I'm like, holy shit. Like
that's giving me tingles. That's...
Yeah. And it's like universal, like this kind of art is universally appealing. It's an experience. It's not like you're watching a movie. It's something new. So I think that these emerging technologies, and when we combine all of these, you know, different technologies into one device like this, there are these emergent properties that are completely unexpected and totally crazy. And it unlocks the ability for artists like myself to design something completely different and beautiful and completely unique for the world. Yeah. So I think that, you know, there's just more and more jobs opening up for 3D artists. There's more and more avenues of content that can be developed, and you know, when we combine AI with VR and AR and all of these things, we're building this digital world that's super unexpected. Like some of it's predictable, but it's always like more unique and crazier than we expect. You know, the truth is always like stranger than fiction, and it's just exciting to see. So it's like I can't necessarily predict like where all of this is going, but I can say that I believe it's going to be very, very exciting, and that, you know, I just want to create more and more art, and honestly, like, help heal the world through my art, and bring people together and give them, like, novel experiences, and impact them emotionally, and like, it's crazy that my art could actually, like, help people. You know, that is not something I ever considered. You know, it used to be more of a selfish thing. It used to be more just like, I'm making cool, fun visuals, and like, you know, I love tinkering around in this software and nerding out, but like, there's maybe a bigger meaning to it all than I thought.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've seen the non-VR version, and wow, it's just like, you're engaged in this, and it's so hypnotic. And it's like, exactly. You know, with the music as well, the soundtrack to it is like, you know, it's beautiful. So
Yeah.
It's awesome. And yeah, you're doing the right things. And with these future mediums, there's like, in London, there's Outernet. I visited Outernet a couple of months back now. That's like, it's not exactly the sphere, but it has a good element of like all four walls and ceiling are a screen basically, and it's really cool. And I was in Montreal last week at the MUTEC event, and yeah, they've got like a dome there, so it's kind of like a sphere, but it's with projections.
Totally.
And that's cool as well. There was some amazing visuals from some artists over in Montreal and around the world who came and displayed their art there, and that was immersive. That was a good experience there.
Awesome.
But yeah, VR is like, it's very personal as well, isn't it? It's like,
it is.
It's just you and the art, and I think that's something beautiful about that.
Yeah, and I made sure to use noise canceling headphones as well with the VR, so that it's like instantly immersive. And it was funny. I was at Beeple's grand opening, and I finally showed him my VR experience, and like it was the after party, and the DJ was just going off, and like you couldn't hear anyone. And he put this thing on, and the immersive, the noise canceling headphones worked. And it just like gave him this moment of peace, and he came out and he was like, "Wow, I am really relaxed now." And this was in the middle of all of this chaos, Yeah,
that's cool. That is very cool.
Yeah. I was also going to say that I think the future too. If you look at what Jules Urbach's ultimate goal is, I'm just going to say where, but he wants to build the holodeck. And there are already these like 3D screens that, if you think of like the Nintendo 3DS, where it shows you two different, like views dependent on each eye, without glasses. So imagine a screen like that, but on crack. The Looking Glass factory has a display where it'll show you like 60 different views as you move your head around. So it's like ultra 3D feeling, and it's basically a holographic panel. And then, there's also the technology for that to work vertically, where you move your head up and down, and use parallax as well. So imagine a whole room of those TVs strung together and what that would be like. So that would basically allow me to create that true like glass box moving through dimensions where people can see off into infinity, and it can be more of a group experience, which I think is something worthwhile, very worthwhile as well. And unique, yes, VR is extremely personal and can be meditative and be used for therapy and all these great purposes. But imagine going with a group of your friends on some kind of crazy journey through dimensions, and that you've never seen before. And I think that's an incredible possibility as well.
Yeah, that's it. Jules is his vision for the holodeck. Mm-hmm. It's coming into fruition. The technology is yet to catch up with Jules. It's like, his vision from the get-go has been absolutely amazing. And like, they're already working on the Roddenberry archive. They've brought back 2001: A Space Odyssey. So there's work they've done on that. And the archive, I think with the Apple VR glasses, that's like incredible as well, being able to have these experiences in a device like that, so accessible. And I think the future is going to be amazing for all of this immersive media. Absolutely. So I think we're going to just open up. We've got 3 minutes left on this space. Let's see if there's any questions. So we've not left it long, guys, for you guys to have some questions, but let's see if you've yet to put anything. There may have been some in the previous live. I'm happy to answer anything. One question you asked me that I didn't really get to yet is, my advice to people just entering the field. Yes. I would say it's immerse yourself. So my path personally, I started as an Uber generalist, right? I started by learning editing, visual effects, color grading, director of photography, like all of these different things. And then I gradually honed in on the thing that I love the most, which is 3D visuals. And then beyond that, concert visuals and like the specific style of abstract artwork. But it's like, if you start broad, then you have a much larger base for,
just a much larger knowledge and all the different jobs that exist in this field, and then you can hone in on your specialty. And so that kind of gives you the best of both worlds. You're not like a specialist where if something changes, for instance, like say you're at ILM and you're the guy that makes the raindrops on the brim of some character's hat or whatever, right? That can be like, automated out pretty easily. Or if you're like a roto artist or something, where you're just doing one really specific thing, you could lose your job. And so you need to be like very flexible. You need to be able to pivot. You need to love learning and basically have a passion for 3D. If you don't love it, you're not going to make it, because it's a very hard job, and it has to be like a self-perpetuating thing. You have to, like I used to watch for years and years, like now I'm old and jaded, but for years and years I would watch tutorials for fun. I would just go and sit and watch tutorials, and my job was my fun. And I think that's so important. I feel so grateful and lucky to be able to do something for work that is fun for me. And I think anybody in this field, they're probably in it because it's fun for them. So I would say that passion, and then also immersing yourself. So back in the day, my version of that was doing, for instance, like lots of 24 and 48-hour film contests. I did like 10 or 15 of them in the span of 2 years. And they're grueling and hard, and you're staying up all night and sleep depriving yourself. But it was like always a test for like, how many visual effects shots can I do, in one overnight session and make this thing look really badass. But that level of immersion and collaborating with my peers, it would open up doors. It would create opportunities that were completely unexpected. Even though it's just some dinky like film contest, the director or someone on set would usually see my work and be like, oh, I have a film, or I have a buddy that needs something like that for their film. And like, so it would just create these connections. And the same thing goes with like going to industry events. Like if you show up in person, you're way more likely to, develop connections with people where there's a level of trust. Like your clients will trust you more. Or artists pass each other work. Like if somebody sees your work and they're like, oh, that's sick, they're much more likely, you're like at the top of their mind, they're much more likely to chuck a job that they can't do because they're already to you, or or something like that. So that level of immersion I think is really important, especially in the early years of just like developing your skills rapidly. There's so many different avenues of work. There's so many different pieces of software to learn, and also different styles of artwork that you could gravitate towards, that it's like so infinite. It doesn't feel like we're all like in competition with each other. It feels like it makes more sense for it to be collaborative, and for artists to just develop, like figure out what they love, like what do you gravitate towards visually, what does your style look like, or what do your multiple styles look like, and that takes years and years, but hopefully that's a decent starting point of just like being comfortable, like sucking it first, being comfortable just doing a lot of different random jobs, and knowing that, not really competing with other people, because it can get discouraging if you see other people's work that's crazy good, like you're like, oh, I'm never going to be that good. But over time, that slow like growth, like really builds on itself and reaches like a exponential growth. And it's more important to compete with your past self. Like look back at your reel from a year ago, or your work from a year ago. And if you're better than that, then you're on the right track, So it's just that slow growth over time that will eventually get you to a place of being super comfortable with the software, where it gets out of your way, and then you get into a pure flow state of creativity. And that's ultimately the best thing.
Yeah. That's some really good sound advice, I think.
Thank you.
So anybody wanting to take this step in the world of creating with 3D software, just take it easy, take it in your stride. Don't compare yourself with other people, and just keep on keeping on.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. You know what? It's been awesome speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, this was really fun. I'm really stoked that you had me on. And let's keep in touch.
Definitely. I think we'll definitely have you on in the future as well, because there's so many things we haven't yet discussed.
Totally.
Like the Cinema 4D Wizard. We didn't even get to that. And it's like, there's so many other things. So we'll absolutely have you on again. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and tune in this time next week. We're yet to decide whether we'll be on Instagram Live or Spaces, but we will let you know. Follow our socials. There's Render Token here, and on X, it's Render Network. So give us a follow, and obviously take a look at this guy's work. He's here. Just tap on his profile. We'll obviously put a post out as well where you can take a look at his work and give him a follow. David, it's been amazing having you. And until next time.
Thank you so much, man.
Until next time, take care.
Later.
See you.